Dados are one of the most commonly used joints in woodworking, particularly in cabinet-type projects. The most common tools used when making dados are router bits and stacked dado sets. Flat-bottom router bits can be used to cut dados in a router table or in a handheld router when teamed up with shop-made jigs. Our auto-width dado jig shown here actually uses a piece of the stock for setting it up. Whether you're using router bits or a stacked dado set in a table saw, the cutter depth is important, so use quality tools and take your time to get this setting right. You can find a lot of discussion about the depth of a dado, but for most, it seems that 1/3 of the thickness of the wood that it's being cut into is about right. For projects like cabinets or bookcases, it's these little ledges that really give the dado all its support. Glue the wood into a good fitting dado, and this is a very strong joint. Laying out a dado seems like a simple enough thing to do, but this is a good place to get yourself in trouble real fast. I've learned the hard way to draw the full layout right on the wood. It shows me exactly where the dado is and where the material is to be removed. There are a lot of people that think just because the dado cutter doesn't come all the way through the wood, that it's safe to push the wood through with just your hand. What they don't seem to be thinking about is just how close that cutter is to your hand. If the wood happens to fracture or kick out, there's absolutely nothing that's going to stop you from dropping your hand right onto the cutter. I like to use these push blocks that come with most joiners. The rubber sole on them gives you a very good grip on the wood, better than with your bare hand. And plus they give you a lot of control over the wood and put that extra space between you and the cutter should something go wrong. When making a cut, you want to use a nice easy feed rate that lets the bit do its work without overfeeding it. With a good bit and good technique, we get a good flat bottom cut with nice crisp edges. The result should be a nice snug fit. With a thin but even coat of glue, this will be a very strong joint. The stacked dado head cutter on a table saw is also a very popular tool for cutting dados. On many table saws, there's a groove or valley between the shoulder of the arbor and the threads. If your saw has this groove or valley in the arbor, you want to be careful about installing thin chippers or even shims because they can fall down into that and hang out of line with the rest of the dado stack. The first component that gets installed is one of the outside blades. Each dado stack has 2 outside cutters. Those blades are always mounted on the outside of the stack and are usually marked. After the first outside blade, we can begin installing the chippers. When installing each of the components, we have to be sure that they do not contact the teeth of the blade next to them. The teeth on a stacked dado set are intentionally made wide enough so that they overlap the ones next to them to produce a nice clean floor of the dado. If the teeth of the dado are contacting each other during use, they can chip or break off of the blade. The length of your arbor determines how wide of a stack you can use and do it safely. Many light-duty saws have an arbor that's too short to use a full dado stack safely. Even with the full-length arbor, I can't screw the nut on all the way with the factory blade washer in place. The nut must be able to screw on far enough so that there's at least one thread showing outside of the nut. The smaller diameter of the stacked dado set, plus the fact that we're clamping a bunch of blades together, means that we don't necessarily need to have the washer on there for stability. And don't overlook the safety and performance that a zero clearance insert can add to your stacked dado set. And just as I do with the router bits, I use my combination square to set the dado stack cutting height. Actually, cutting the dados on a table saw is no different than at the router table. I always use my rubber-soled push blocks and take my time. A nice steady feed gives you the best cut. The dado on the left is one we just cut on the table saw. The one on the right is from the router table. The outer blades of the stacked dado set leave a tiny groove or ear on the corners of the dado, and those little ears are actually present in this groove, and while difficult to see, they really bother some people. And just like with the router table, we want the stacked dado set to cut a groove that fits the wood closely. Neither too tight nor too loose is as strong as a nice slip-in fit.